Imagine a whisper that's been trapped for nearly 4 decades. A whisper of 15 children, vibrant with laughter, dreams, and the innocent excitement of a field trip, who simply vanished. The town itself became a monument to absence, its streets haunted by phantom echoes of young voices. The years turned into decades, each one piling heavier than the last, burying the memory not just under dust, but under a suffocating blanket of disbelief and a chilling acceptance that some mysteries simply are meant to be solved. She'd just poured her first mug of coffee, the rich aroma swirling in her quiet kitchen, when the dispatch radio crackled to life. This wasn't just a case, it was a scar on the soul of Holstead County. 15 children, 1 bus driver, vanished in 1986. Students from Holstead Ridge Elementary, her elementary school. The dull, cracked yellow of the bus was visible in patches, half buried in the mud, brutally crushed by the weight of years. A sour, earthy smell, ancient and profound, hung heavy in the air. As she reached the front, her gaze snagged on something taped to the dashboard, barely faded. A class list. It was written in the cheerful, looping handwriting of Miss Delaney, the homeroom teacher who had vanished with them. 15 names, all between 9 and 11 years old. But at the very bottom, scrawled in a different, darker, sloppier hand, written over an angry red marker, was a message that chilled Lana to the bone. We never made it to Morning Lake. Inside, it was a tableau of dust, mold, and the brittle decay of time. The seats were still in place, some of the seat belts still eerily latched. A small pink lunchbox lay on the floor beneath the 3rd row. A child's shoe, covered in dried moss, rested on the back step, but the bus was empty, no bodies. That made it somehow worse. A hollow monument, a terrifying question mark buried deep in the dirt. A massive backhoe stood motionless beside it, looking almost like a guilty beast that had just unearthed a grave. "Ma'am," the site foreman greeted her, his voice hushed as he removed his hard hat. A bird called out from somewhere in the pines, but it sounded more like a warning than a greeting. She turned to the site foreman, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. "No one touches anything else until the state team gets here." "Yes, ma'am," he replied, his eyes wide. She looked back at the bus, framed by the silent pines. They were supposed to be gone for 2 days. Instead, they never came back. And now, after nearly 4 decades, the bus had returned without them. But someone had been here long enough to write that terrifying note. Long enough to leave a message from the deep, dark past. "We didn't touch anything once we saw what it was. You'll definitely want to see this." Lana merely nodded, her throat too constricted to speak. Her grade, her classmates. She'd been home that day, struck down by chickenpox, a childhood illness that had ironically saved her from becoming one of the lost. For nearly 4 decades, that strange, quiet guilt had festered inside her, a tiny, unremovable splinter beneath her skin. Without a second thought, she slid the untouched coffee into the sink, grabbed her keys and walked out the door, leaving it unlocked behind her. Nothing in her house mattered more than this possible discovery. Morning Lake Pines. Construction team unearthed what they think is a school bus. The fog, thick as ever, swallowed sounds and stretched time, making every mile feel like 10. Ancient pines rose on either side of the narrow 2-lane road, standing like silent, watchful sentinels. Lana passed the abandoned ranger station, a skeletal reminder of happier times, and turned onto the overgrown service road. This was it, the path that had once led to the summer nature camp, the destination of that fateful field trip. She remembered the sheer excitement, the last outing before summer break. A lake, a crackling fire pit, brand new cabins built by volunteers. She could almost see their smiling faces in her mind's eye, pressed against the bus windows in old yearbook photos. Kids with Walkmans, cartoon backpacks, disposable cameras. All of them. The words hit her with the force of a physical blow, freezing her in place. The warmth of the mug in her hand suddenly felt like a burning coal. They became just another cold case, a faded file, a whispered warning in a small American town where the trees stand tall and silent, holding their secrets close. They boarded a yellow school bus in the quiet, unassuming town of Holstead County back in 1986, and were swallowed whole by the earth, by time, by an impossible silence. Join us as we uncover the truths they tried to bury and ensure that no name, no memory stays forgotten. No crumpled metal, no scattered debris, no desperate SOS, just an eerie, gaping void where innocence once stood.
I think of the parents.
Every sunrise, a fresh stab of agony. Every sunset, a fading hope. But what if silence isn't always permanent? What if some whispers refuse to stay buried? Fast forward to today, nearly 40 years later, a forgotten construction crew digging deep in the dense, pine-scented woods near Morning Lake stumbles upon something impossible. Not just an old school bus, half-crushed and mud-caked, like a forgotten tomb. But inside its shadowy confines, where only decay should linger, a flicker of life, a survivor. A ghost from the past aged normally, seemingly lost in time, now found. And the truth she carries, woven into the fabric of her very being, is more shattering, more unbelievable, more terrifying than any nightmare Holstead County ever dared to imagine. Her memory isn't just a recollection, it's a key to unlocking a hidden horror, a betrayal so profound it will rip open the quiet facade of their world. Are you ready to hear a secret the world tried to bury? Before we delve into this astonishing story, make sure you hit that subscribe button. It was just past 7 that chilly morning when the world stopped for Deputy Sheriff Lana Whitaker. Her other hand instinctively reached for the notepad she always kept by the toaster. But she didn't need to write anything down. The drive to Morning Lake was a silent, slow crawl. When she arrived, the construction crew had already established a perimeter, their faces etched with a mix of shock and morbid curiosity. They had cleared one side, enough to pry open the emergency exit door. Lana stepped inside, her boots creaking on the warped floorboards. The air was stale and suffocating. Lana backed out of the bus, the air outside suddenly colder. The old Holstead County Records building smelled of mildew and stale lemon cleaner, its ceiling fans spinning with a weary slowness, as if exhausted by the weight of forgotten time. Lana stood at the counter, her fingers drumming an impatient rhythm on the worn wood. It had been 20 minutes since she'd left the bus site, but her hands still felt gritty with its ancient dust. He had reportedly vanished shortly after the disappearance and was never found. Then there was the substitute teacher, Ann M. Zetwell, filling in for a sick Miss Delaney. No one remembered hiring her. "Sheriff, you need to see this." The records listed an address, but it was now just an overgrown, abandoned lot on the edge of town. A woman had been found by a fishing couple, half a mile from the dig site. We thought it was just trauma until she gave us her name. The nurse handed Lana a clipboard. Scrawled across the top, in trembling, almost childlike handwriting, was one name: Nora Kelly. She was barefoot, dressed in tattered clothes that looked alien to the local brands. Dehydrated, malnourished, barely conscious, but she was alive. She, too, had never been seen again. "Here we are," the clerk announced, carefully sliding a heavy case box across the counter with both hands, as if it might crumble at a touch. "She says she was on a school field trip," the nurse added softly, "and that she's been trying to get home ever since. They told me no one would remember," Nora whispered, her gaze drifting past Lana, towards the window, then back. "That no one would come. They were unmistakable. Wide, piercing green." Lana stopped at the foot of the bed, her voice a barely audible whisper. "Nora, you got old," she whispered, a single tear tracing a path down her pale cheek. Field Trip 6, B. Holstead Ridge Elementary, May 19th, 1986. Sealed after 5 years. No updates. Doctors had run basic evaluations. No signs of injury beyond sun exposure, dehydration, and severe psychological trauma. Her DNA was being processed, but Lana didn't need the test. It was her. She was sure. Nora had been moved to a quieter wing. When Lana entered, she found her curled beneath a blanket, staring blankly at a small paper cup of water on her tray. Lana nodded, taking the heavy box to one of the side desks. She opened the lid slowly, half expecting something to leap out. But her voice was clearer now. "You believe me, don't you?" She didn't sit down. Instead, she stood, staring at the whiteboard she had cleared that morning. It now held 15 names tacked up in 2 neat columns, above them in stark red marker. Morning Lake Field Trip, May 19th, 1986. Below that, new heading. Nora Kelly, survived, returned. She circled Nora's name, then added, "Found May 5th, 2025 near Morning Lake site." And there was someone else. A man. It was like a home, but the windows were covered and the clocks were all wrong. Waiting by the fork in the road. We had to use new names. Appears to have aged normally. Believe she's 12 years old. No memory of events after the bus left school. He said the lake wasn't ready for us yet, that we'd have to wait. Repeats the phrase. We never made it to Morning Lake. Inside were grainy Xeroxed photos of the children, crumpled class rosters, and a meticulous list of personal items reportedly packed for the trip. You had chickenpox? You were supposed to come to? She remembered their names, their bright laughter echoing in the halls, their little backpacks swinging as they raced towards the yellow bus. Her finger traced one face in particular. Nora Kelly. Wide green eyes, a gap where a baby tooth had been, a pink ribbon tied neatly in her hair. Nora had lived 2 houses down from Lana back then. They'd shared popsicles on the curb every summer. The photo made Lana's chest ache with a familiar, dull throb. At the very bottom, stamped in angry red, was the official verdict. Missing persons presumed lost. No evidence of foul play. That stamp had haunted the town for decades. No evidence. No foul play. No children. I don't know if it was his real name. She disappeared after a few months. I think she got sick. But Lana and everyone else who had lived through it had always suspected there was more. The bus driver's name was Carl Davis, a part-time employee, barely vetted, with no wife or children. Lana leaned back in her chair, staring at the faded class photo. A sudden knock on the doorway startled her. Deputy Harris stood there, his eyes wide with an almost desperate urgency. They were at the hospital 15 minutes later, the hurried drive a blur. The nurse stopped Lana outside the exam room. She's stable. No ID. Looks to be in her mid-30s. Keeps saying she's 12 years old, though. Lana's knees nearly buckled. The world tilted on its axis. Lana pushed open the door and stepped inside. The woman sat up slowly on the bed, her hair long and tangled, her face drawn and pale. But her eyes, the woman blinked, her green eyes welling with tears. Lana felt her throat close, tears burning her own eyes. You remember me?" Nora nodded, a fragile movement. Lana walked slowly to the chair beside the bed and sank into it, too stunned to speak. "Who told you that?" Lana asked, her voice gentle, almost afraid to break the fragile moment. Nora turned back, her voice dropping to a chilling whisper. "We never made it to Morning Lake." The sun had dipped behind the trees by the time Lana drove back to the sheriff's office, the golden hour light filtering through the blinds, casting long striped shadows across her desk. Lana exhaled slowly. Something didn't make sense. If Nora had been alive all this time, where had she been? What about the others? By 9 p.m. she was back at the hospital. "Hi again," Lana said softly. "Shh." Nora looked up, her face still holding the gaunt fragility of someone too long separated from the world. "I do," Lana affirmed. Nora managed a sad smile. "Most don't." Kay took a seat. "Can I ask you something?" Nora nodded. "Do you remember the bus ride?" Nora looked down at her hands. Only the beginning. The driver didn't talk much. He wasn't our usual guy. Lana leaned forward, her heart pounding. "Do you remember what he looked like?" "Not really. I think he had a beard. I just remember what he said." "What was that?" Nora's voice dropped to a barely audible whisper. Lana felt a chill crawl up her arms. "He got on the bus." Nora nodded. "And then? I don't know. I woke up in a barn. But it wasn't a barn anymore. What do you mean?" "I always said it was Tuesday, even when it wasn't. You wouldn't let us talk about before." Lana tried to keep her face neutral. "Who's they?" Nora swallowed hard. There were 2 of them at first, a woman and the man. She called him Mr. Avery. "You know where the barn was?" Nora shook her head. "They moved us around sometimes, in vans. We weren't allowed to look outside. They said people had forgotten about us, that it was better this way." Lana sat in stunned silence. "Some of the others," Nora continued, her voice filled with a quiet sorrow. "They forgot about school, about home. But I didn't. I never did." Lana reached into her coat pocket and slid something onto the tray. A faded yearbook photo. Nora picked it up, her eyes wide. "That's me," she whispered. "And that's Caleb and Marcy." It was the old H. Holstead barn. She'd remembered something from Nora's description: the covered windows, the strange clocks. She left a detailed message, requesting a full report on Martin Avery and his last known associates. More of the earth around the buried bus had been cleared, and a second team from the state's Historical Preservation Unit had arrived. She had barely slept, her mind a relentless churn of memory and unease. "Sheriff," one of the investigators called, holding up a sealed evidence sleeve. "You're going to want to see this. Not just for history, but for the chilling implications of what the bus now represented." The tech, a man in his late 40s with square glasses and a quiet voice, held the plastic pouch carefully. Inside was a photograph, color slightly curled at the edges, but not aged like it should have been. Lana frowned. Where was this? Year 2. That meant they had been held for far longer than she dared imagine. She opened a county map and began cross-referencing all Avery-owned properties, abandoned buildings, and old religious sites in the area. One caught her eye: Riverview Camp, an old summer retreat for children, purchased in 1984 by a private family trust. The land records had been scrubbed clean, and the air. It always smelled like burning pine. Property had remained off-grid since the early 90s. It sat at the edge of the national forest, 30 miles from the bus site. Lana circled it in red ink. She didn't expect an answer until morning, but something was happening now. And she couldn't sleep with these ghosts pressing in at the windows. "This was after the first winter," she said softly. "We were made to pose once a season to show progress. You didn't forget," she said, her voice steady. "You came back." She looked Lana directly in the eyes, a desperate plea in her gaze. "They don't want to be found." She looked up, tears forming in her eyes. "That building. Yes. It's where they kept us the longest." Its whistle used to echo for miles at dusk. "Do you recognize this man?" The paved road narrowed to gravel, then just a rutted track, the trees thickening into an impenetrable wall. Fog gathered low on the ground, curling between gnarled roots and old fence posts. Her headlights caught a faded wooden sign, half swallowed by vines. "Riverview Youth Retreat, private land." Lana asked, pointing to the shadowed figure in the photo. This barn had belonged to a man named Frank Avery, who had died in 2003, but he had a son, Martin Avery. Lana stood slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. The past wasn't just whispering anymore, it was screaming. Different place, different rules. Some didn't make it. Some she broke off, her voice cracking. Some forgot their own names, last known address. Unknown. They called him Father Elijah, but he wasn't a priest. He just liked the sound of it, her eyes filled with tears. "You kept this?" It showed a group of children, maybe 8 or 9 of them, standing in front of what looked like a low wooden building. A barn, a lodge, it was hard to tell. The siding was weathered, the windows boarded. The kids' expressions were strange, unnervingly blank. Not frightened, not smiling, just absent. A few of the faces were unmistakable. Marcy, Kimmy, Caleb, and there in the center, Nora. Her green eyes wide but vacant. Lana nodded. "I never stopped." Behind the children, barely visible in the shadows of the doorway, was a man. Tall, bearded, his face mostly obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. She flipped the photo over. There was writing on the back. "The Chosen. Year 2. No date. No location." Just those chilling words. Nora clutched the photo to her chest. A lifeline to a past she almost lost. Later that night, Lana sat alone in her truck, parked outside an old barn on County Line Road. The wind rustled through the tall grass, and a loose door creaked softly like a sigh. Moved towards the side of the building, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, casting long dancing shadows across the dry wood. She didn't turn on the overhead lights, just the amber glow of the lamp on her desk, illuminating the quiet, still office. She placed the bracelet beside the class photo, lining it up with Kimmy Lang's smiling face. Kimmy had been 10 years old, wore glasses, loved dinosaurs. Now this found beside a barn linked to a man with no current address. Something glinted near the base of the barn wall. Metal. She crouched down and found it. A small, faded purple plastic bracelet tangled in the weeds. Etched into the plastic in blocky, childlike handwriting was a name. Kimi Lana. Stepped out of the truck and stared at the dark silhouette of the barn under the moonlight. Lana's breath hitched. Kimmy Lang, one of the 15. A quiet, artistic girl who loved cartoons and wrote her name on everything. The bracelet was still clutched in Lana's hand when she returned to the station just after midnight. Lana picked up the landline and dialed the Texas Missing and Unsolved Cold Case Unit. By sunrise, the Morning Lake dig site buzzed with a quiet, controlled urgency. Lana stood beside the emergency exit, arms folded, watching the forensic technicians meticulously catalog every inch of the hollowed shell. Lana walked over. Wedged behind the metal paneling, above the back left window, he explained, looked recently placed honestly. Lana took the photo and studied it, but Lana's stomach dropped as she noticed something else. Back at the station, Lana laid the photo beside Nora's notebook and her growing collection of names and fragments. That afternoon, she brought the photo to Nora. The moment the image touched her hands, Nora gasped, her fingers trembling. "Do you know where it is?" Nora shook her head slowly. "We weren't allowed outside without blindfolds. But I remember sounds, a river, a whistle at sunset." Lana's mind clicked into gear. Riverview Camp was named for its proximity to a river bend. There had once been a logging train that passed through that region. Nora hesitated, her voice a fragile whisper. "That's not Mr. Avery. That's someone worse." She shuddered. Lana felt a profound chill work its way up her spine. What happened to him? Nora stared at the photo. "I don't know. Just stopped coming one day after year 3. Then we were moved again." Lana placed a gentle hand on Nora's. Nora gave a fragile nod, "But they're still out there. Some of them I feel it. The others." That night, Lana drove north towards Riverview Camp. She parked at the edge of the old property line and stepped out. The silence was absolute. No bird song, no rustling wind, just the low, distant hiss of water. In the dirt, fresh footprints, small ones. Ah. Lana reached for her gun, her voice low, cautious. "Hello? Anyone hear silence?" Then from somewhere inside, the soft creak of floorboards and a whisper. A child's voice just audible in the dark. "You're not supposed to be here." But her left arm was visible, and Lana saw what she was meant to. A bracelet. "Hello?" she called out, her voice firm but not threatening. "I'm not here to hurt anyone. I'm here to help." Silence. And then, softly from the second floor above, "You're not like them." Charcoal and pencil. Crude, but deliberate. She scanned them, her heart thumping. One drawing showed a line of children walking in the woods. Another, a man with no face, arms stretched wide like wings. A third showed a school bus in flames, and on the ground below it, a row of small, identical headstones. Lana stepped back, dizzy, her light shaking in her hand. Purple plastic, the same kind she had found near the barn. "Kimmy, it's okay. You don't have to remember it right now. Are you here to take me away?" Slowly, she climbed, each step shallow, her hand hovering near her sidearm. At the top landing, she paused. He pointed behind her, towards the wall behind the old metal bunk beds. His eyes, gray, distant, and far older than any 10-year-old's, stared out the window, as if waiting for something to leap from the trees. They hadn't spoken much on the drive back. He hadn't asked where they were going. He hadn't asked why she had come. Only one thing seemed to matter to him. Are the others coming back too? Lana hadn't answered because she didn't know. Lana stood and followed his gaze. There, etched faintly into the floorboards, nearly covered by dust, were more names. But these weren't carved by hand. A local social worker was on her way, but Lana had insisted on being the one to talk to him first. He traced a small finger over each face. "I remember her," he whispered. "That's Marcy." Then he tapped another, and him. Sam, he always got in trouble. He wasn't good at staying quiet. He pointed to one more. Lana's own childhood face. "You were supposed to come." She brought him a juice box, an old wool hoodie, and a set of photos she'd printed from the original yearbook, laminated and faded from time. They had been burned into the wood with heat or time, or something she couldn't quite explain. The wood around them was scorched. Beneath them, in black ink, was written, "Names we must not forget." There were 12 names. 3 were circled. The rest were crossed out. One of the doors at the end of the hall was slightly open, a faint flicker of candlelight visible through the gap. She moved towards it. They called me Jonah, but that wasn't my name. She flipped the photo over. On the back, one word: disobeyed. A river, perhaps? Lana grabbed her flashlight and followed the overgrown path. They told us not to draw, but we did anyway. They'd found another photo, buried beneath the rear floor panel of the bus. This one was partially burned. It showed 4 children seated around a campfire. One of them, facing the camera directly, had dark skin and short hair. It's in the bottom corner, written in marker. He stayed. He chose to stay. She turned, and there he was. A boy, no older than 10, standing barefoot in the doorway. Eyes dark, hair shaggy, pale, thin, dirt smudged across his cheek. Halfway down the trail, she saw it. The building from the photo. Its roof sagged, the porch rotted through, but the walls were the same wooden siding, blackened at the corners. The windows were boarded from the inside. She approached slowly. Just before stepping onto the porch, she froze. Lana's hand gripped the flashlight tighter as she stepped slowly onto the warped porch. The wood groaned under her weight. Another whisper echoed from inside, low, almost playful. She came anyway. The door was cracked open, just a sliver. No recent signs of forced entry, no new locks or chains. The wood beneath her creaked but held. She passed what had once been a table, now splintered and tipped against a wall. There was something beneath it. She crouched. A box. Metal rusted at the edges, but intact. She pried it open slowly. Inside were papers, yellowed and damp, but on top, a thin stack of Polaroids bound by a rubber band. She lifted them out. Children again, but not posed this time. These were candid, taken from angles that made them feel wrong. Some were sleeping, some eating. One was crying in the corner of a narrow, windowless room. Each photo had a name written on the back, but not their real names. Dove, Glory, Silence, Obedience. But the smell, earthy and metallic, drifted out. As though the air hadn't moved in years, Lana nudged the door with her foot. Shh. It opened with a long, drawn-out creak. Her beams swept across the room. Bare walls, dust-choked air, the skeletal remains of furniture long abandoned. But what caught her eye first was what had been carved into the far wall. Words, children's names. Some scratched shallow, as if rushed. Others carved deep, angrily, again and again, like someone was trying not to forget. Kimmy, Marcy, Elijah, Caleb, Sam. Lana swallowed hard. This wasn't just a hiding place. It had been a prison. She stepped forward, her boots stirring the dust. The last photo was different. Child standing alone by a tree, her face turned away. Suddenly a soft creak behind her. Lana stood quickly, flashlight darting across the room. Lana turned towards the staircase, old and brittle, but still holding. Inside, the air was warmer. Someone had been here. The walls were covered in children's drawings. Then she heard it again, that voice quiet and close. "Who are you?" Lana asked gently, lowering the flashlight. The boy didn't answer right away. Lana crouched, her voice steady. "Do you remember your real name?" He hesitated, then shook his head. "They took it." She nodded slowly. "I'm here to help," Lana said softly. "Are you alone?" Jonah looked at the floor. No. Lana sat with Jonah in the back of her SUV, the boy wrapped in a heavy blanket, silent except for the soft rustle of the emergency thermal foil crinkling with each movement. At the station, she gently ushered him into the back office, a quiet space she rarely used, and pulled the blinds shut. Jonah sat with the photos in his lap. Lana smiled faintly. But I got sick." Jonah tilted his head, a strange, knowing look in his eyes. "That's lucky." Meanwhile, across town, the forensics team called in with a new discovery. Lana stared at the photo. Something tugged at the edge of her memory. She pulled up the old roster again, mentally reviewing each name until she paused at one. Aaron Devlin, age 11 at the time of the trip. Quiet, bright, a gifted chess player, always reading books far beyond his grade. She checked the county database. There was an A. Devlin listed in the town's electrical department. Age 49. no high school record on file prior to 1990, moved into Holstead in 2004, lived alone in a trailer outside of town. You used to wear braids and a jean jacket with patches. No listed next of kin. Lana stood slowly. She didn't believe in coincidences anymore. The trailer was perched at the edge of a gravel lot, half buried by pine needles. The door rusted at the hinges, swayed slightly in the faint breeze. He wore a simple flannel shirt and work jeans. But there was something about the way he stood, still, like someone waiting for judgment. "Aaron Devlin?" Lana asked. A single bulb above the porch flickered faintly as Lana pulled up. She knocked once. No answer. She knocked again. When I finally left, I didn't know how to be anything other than quiet. He looked at her, his gaze unwavering. "But if you're here now, someone else must have come back." She remembered, he whispered. "After all this time?" Her heart skipped a beat. "Why didn't you come forward?" This time a voice answered, low, calm. "Oh, I knew someone would come eventually." "I know where the others might be," he said, his voice barely a whisper. There was an uprising. Some of the kids, older by then, they set part of the sanctuary ablaze. The group scattered. The younger ones were moved, split up, hidden under new names. He stood. "They buried the truth in the woods. But I can take you there, at least where they were sent after the fires." A half-collapsed structure leaned against the hillside. The roof had caved in, vines twisted up through the wooden frame like nature was trying to reclaim what man had hidden. "This was the original sanctuary," Aaron said quietly. "No light, no noise, just the sound of your own thoughts until they stopped making sense." Inside, the smell of mildew and ash lingered faintly. Scorched floorboards, broken furniture. But in one corner, shielded beneath a collapsed beam, was something intact. A set of 3 small lockers, rusted but still upright. Nora drew that. "I remember, the day before she ran," Aaron joined her. "These were ours," he said. "They made us keep only what they gave us. Blank books, uniforms, 1 spoon. Some of us hid pieces of who we used to be." It was quieter here, colder. They didn't teach anymore, just observed. Lana's stomach turned. "They put kids in there, Marcy. Kimmy Nora once, for saying the word school. But the third, something was there. A bundle, wrapped in cloth."
Oh.
She carefully lifted it out and opened it. The sun was beginning to dip low, sending long fading beams through the trees. Ahead, partially camouflaged by moss and age, stood a concrete structure built into the hillside. There were no signs, no markings, no path, only a steel door rusted at the hinges. Inside, a cracked cassette player, a child's bracelet, and a drawing carefully preserved in plastic. It showed a girl standing on a hill beneath a full moon. She wore a red ribbon, and in her hand was a sign. 3 words were written on it. "We are still here. I let it happen." His voice cracked. "I didn't stop it. I believed it was the only way we'd survive." The first sight. The place we were taken after the bus was diverted. It used to be bigger. There were 4 cabins, a lodge, and 2 underground cells. The door opened. The man who stood there looked older than his years, gray streaks at the temples, eyes sharp and unreadable. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with books on psychology, memory, and group behavior. I believed in it for a long time. I thought it was safe there. That's where they moved the younger ones when the fire came. They didn't call it sanctuary anymore. Lana sat across from him, listening intently. "But then things changed," he continued. "After year 4, the group splintered. Elijah disappeared. The others began to rebel. Marcy ran. Nora's breath caught. She stared at it like she was seeing a ghost. He stayed behind," she whispered. "We thought he was gone, but he stayed. And they listened to him." She looked up, her eyes filled with a new, fragile hope. "Do you think he remembers us?" Caleb tried to fight back. "I stayed not because I agreed, but because I was afraid of the outside. I left the sanctuary in 1991, Aaron said, sitting carefully on the edge of the couch. "I was 16. They let me go." The leaves rustled, but the air was still. Each step Lana took on the narrow trail behind Aaron Devlin stirred the silence like dust. He hadn't said a word in the last mile, only walked with a quiet urgency, hands in the pockets of his jacket, eyes never straying from the path. Nora hadn't come. Her body too weak, her memories too raw. Lana had promised to go, to see what was left, and to try to find who wasn't. He didn't respond right away, then nodded once. "I remember you," he said softly. Lana blinked. "You remember me? We were in the same class. You had a green backpack with a silver zipper that always got stuck." Aaron stepped aside, a silent invitation, because not everyone wanted to leave. Inside the trailer was meticulously clean, sparse. Chessboard sat on a small coffee table. "Let you. I was the one who stayed when others tried to escape, the one who helped them keep order." Lana's voice was steady. "You could have helped find them. I was told the world had forgotten us, that our families had moved on." His voice broke slightly. Lana nodded. "Nora," Aaron's eyes flickered. "She never forgot." Aaron looked away, towards the window where dusk was just beginning to touch the treetops. "Fires." Aaron's hands clenched. That night Lana met Nora in her hospital room and showed her the photo of the boy at the fire. Lana nodded slowly. Remembers everything. The forest felt different now. It's not wild or free, but watchful, as though it remembered what had been done here. They reached a small clearing just after noon, surrounded by towering pines. Lana paused. "Cells." He nodded slowly. They called them reflection rooms, but they were just pits. Lana took a deep breath and stepped into the ruins. Lana pulled open the first locker. It's empty. The second, barely ajar, held only a torn shoe and a melted crayon. Lana knelt, the drawing in her lap. It wasn't just a plea. It was a declaration. Aaron crouched beside her. "You said they scattered the others." Lana whispered. "Where?" He pointed toward the ridge behind the old sanctuary. "There's a second trail hidden." "What did they call it?" Aaron's eyes darkened. "Haven." 2 hours later, Lana stood at the crest of the ridge. Aaron approached it slowly. This was where they took the ones too young to question, or the ones too broken to resist. They'd call it watching the fruit ripen. I didn't understand what they meant at the time. But it was about control, about waiting for. "Waiting for what?" Lana asked. Aaron looked away. "For obedience, for full forgetting." He placed his palm on the cold metal door. "There's a room inside, sealed. Last I saw, they called it the garden." "And what happened to the ones who didn't stop asking?" "No lights, just voices. They made some of us stay in there until we stopped asking to leave." Lana shivered. The air inside was damp and still. Her flashlight beams swept across cement floors, water-stained walls, and broken furniture. Hundreds, maybe thousands, each one scratched in sequence, counting something. Time, days, punishments. This wasn't some relic left behind for curiosity. It was a message. Someone had wanted to be heard. In the far corner, her beam caught the edge of something buried beneath dust and broken plaster. It took hours, but by early evening, the tape was ready to play. Just once, it was too fragile for repeated runs. The tape was old, but the voice wasn't Nora's. The voice was younger, more hesitant, but unmistakably Kimmy Lang. "She's alive," she said quietly. He pointed to a spot near the far end of the woods, just beyond the second ridge. There was a hatch hidden in the roots of a tree that had been split by lightning. They used it when they wanted to move people without being seen. I don't know how I know that, but I do. Lana didn't argue, because the voice hadn't sounded like someone at the end. It had sounded like someone waiting. She asked to be alone when they played it back. The sky was overcast, the branches thick overhead, every snapped twig underfoot echoing like a warning. They found the tree. A tall cedar, hollowed near the base. Its trunk cleaved decades ago and blackened on one side by lightning. Beneath its roots, carefully concealed behind brush and loose stone, was a rusted metal hatch. The lights were low, rain tapping against the station windows. She pressed play. Cold air poured out like a sigh. Lana led the way down the old ladder. The hinges shrieked as they pried it open with crowbars. Dust poured out in thick clouds. The air was stale, unmoved for decades. Inside, the light from Lana's flashlight landed on a figure. Hunched thin, wrapped in layered clothes and tattered blankets. A girl, but not a child. Woman. Maybe late 30s, maybe 40. Eyes wide, hair matted, skin pale and translucent from years without sunlight. She blinked and shielded her face. Too bright, she whispered. Too fast. What they found below was not just a tunnel, but a network. Hallways, rooms, bunks, crates, all abandoned, but too intact for comfort. And then they reached a door, worn wood-lined, but sealed tight. She knelt carefully and brushed it free. A small recorder, the kind used by journalists or investigators. Battered, the tape inside nearly disintegrated. Then, from behind the door, something scraped. A footstep. Lana pressed her ear to the wood and heard it. A voice, small, cautious. Is it finally okay to speak again? She flipped it over, etched into the plastic with a pin or nail. For the ones who remember, some of them are still alive, Sheriff, he said quietly. The fluorescent lights flickered gently overhead. A nurse entered, startled by her expression. You okay, sweetie? The walls were close, the ceiling low, and the air thick and unmoving, felt as though it hadn't been breathed in decades.
Ow.
The voice behind the door had been small, raspy, and full of something that hit her harder than fear. Hope. Then they said we couldn't leave until someone remembered us. She stepped forward and knocked again. Hello, my name is Lana. I'm a sheriff, but you're safe now. Can't tell how long I've been here, but I think I remember school. I think I had a brother. A long pause. When she played the tape, Nora covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. I remember this, she whispered. She used to practice her voice like she wanted someone to hear it the right way someday. She was trying to hold on. They don't let us say real names. They say that's how the world finds you. But I write them anyway, even if it's just in my head. Another pause. If anyone finds this, don't believe them when they say we ran away. We didn't. We were taken. We were made into something else. Another long, heavy pause. Right. But I'm not gone. Not yet. No furniture, no windows, just cold, oppressive concrete. But the smell, that same faint mix of damp earth, old metal, and something else, something fainter, almost sweet, made Lana pause. Behind her, Aaron remained outside the doorway, refusing to come in. He had said the children weren't just kept here. They were retrained here, made to sit in silence for hours, told to whisper prayers that weren't prayers, taught to forget the sound of their own names. I don't know where, but I know it in my bones. He stepped back, his voice a whisper, because I hear them in my dreams. It's calling each other by the names they weren't supposed to say. Scratches lined the walls. Names, symbols, short messages etched with fingernails, keys or worse. But what stopped Lana cold was a small door to the right. A plaque hung crookedly above it. The only word on it, garden. There was a room, Nora continued, her voice gaining a strange urgency. No light, cold walls, and someone whispering. She swallowed hard. They were saying my name. The garden wasn't a room. It was a void. He didn't answer. They pried open the door with an emergency jack from Lana's truck. She turned to Aaron. He nodded slowly. Back at the hospital, Nora awoke just after midnight, heart pounding, breath shallow. Nora stared at her. I had a dream, she whispered. But it wasn't mine. The nurse leaned closer. Lana stood just inside the threshold of the garden room, her flashlight beam trembling as it pierced the heavy dark. Lana scanned the room. The walls were covered in marks, not just names this time, but tallies. She slipped it into an evidence bag, her hand suddenly unsteady. At the station, Lana called in the tech team to carefully restore the cassette. Static. Then a voice, small, weak. This is Nora, I think. Lana sat in the silence, her pulse racing. That night, she brought the recorder to Nora at the hospital. She never gave up, Lana said gently, even when the others started to fade. Nora reached for the tape, then stopped. The next day, Aaron handed Lana a map, hand-drawn from memory. You think it's still there? They were smart, Aaron said, and they were. Hours later, Lana and a small team hiked into the dense forest. They forced it open. A narrow tunnel descended into the earth. She knocked once. Silence. Lana stood frozen in the tunnel, her breath held tight in her chest. Another silence. Lana signaled to the deputy behind her to help unseal the door. Lana crouched carefully. What's your name? The woman trembled, clutching something close to her chest. A leather-bound notebook, its edges cracked with time. They called me Silence, she said, her voice barely a whisper. But that wasn't mine. Do you remember your real name? She stared for a long moment, then whispered, Kimmy Lang. Lana's throat tightened. The girl in the Polaroids, the name on the bracelet, the voice on the tape, and now alive. You had the red ribbon, she whispered. Her responses were slow, careful, like she wasn't sure the world around her was real. Nora sat across from her in the quiet recovery room, watching through tear-filled eyes. You remember me? She asked softly. Back at the hospital, doctors worked in silence. Kimmy barely spoke during the initial evaluation, but in the corners of the page were numbers, shapes, dates, and names. The records mentioned a second tunnel, Lana said. One that was never found. So many names. Caleb, taken from Sanctuary, 1988, did not return. Marisquai escaped during fire, believed dead, not confirmed. The older kids spoke of it like a myth, a way out, but I think it wasn't an escape route, Sam. Broken hatch, no recovery. JONAH, obedient, transferred. Nora, punished, erased memory, withheld. Me, waiting. Each entry grew darker, more fractured, until the final one. If someone finds this, don't just take us back. Nora had fallen asleep in the chair beside her, her hand resting on the bed's edge. Kimmy turned her face toward the window. Outside, morning was breaking. She hadn't seen a sunrise in almost 30 years. Her voice, when it came, was barely a breath. It's not over yet. A rush of cold air poured out, dry and bitter, tinged with mildew and something faintly metallic. The shaft was narrow, reinforced with concrete, and sloped downward for nearly 20 feet before flattening into a narrow corridor. There, arranged in a tight circle, were 15 small desks, all facing inward.
Ow.
Each one had a nameplate. Some Lana recognized, some she didn't. At the center of the circle, beneath a dusty glass dome, was a locked case. Inside it, a book. Lana broke the glass gently and retrieved it. Cassia. She was older than us. Quiet. She never joined the chants. They said she disappeared during year 3. The cover was plain black, worn leather, but when she opened it, her breath caught. The final curriculum. Her boots echoed as she stepped into the past. Take us forward. Help us become real again. Look for room 6. Static. Then copy that. 10 rooms each, no larger than a walk-in closet. Some contained beds, others only mats. A few had drawings on the wall, crude stick figures holding hands, suns with sharp rays, the outline of a bus disappearing over a hill. But there were no children, only remnants. Kimmy turned her head, her lips parting. It took hours, but when they finally breached it, the air hit them like a wave of time gone wrong. Inside were no beds, no windows, just photographs. Hundreds of them, children in uniforms, children kneeling, children standing in rows with blank faces. And then, in the center of the far wall, a mural painted by hand. It showed a girl running through trees, her arms outstretched, her face turned upward toward the light. The words painted beneath, Cassia remembered. She left the light on for us. Buried in coded margins and scattered through false verses, Lana pieced together the meaning. 3 stone trees, stream that split but never rejoined. Memory is danger, the past is the infection, the future is correction. Each page grew more unstable, notes scrawled by different hands, some childlike, others firm. A name repeated on page after page, Cassia, then crossed out, and written again on the very last page. Cassia did not forget. Cassia ran. Cassia saw what they did in room 6. Room 6 is sealed. And a red X drawn over a hollow curve at the bend of the river. Aaron had told her once that the forest north of Morning Lake was riddled with sinkholes, some natural, others man-made. Nora smiled through the ache. You used to braid it for me? The riverbed was low from the dry season, revealing dark limestone and twisted roots. Faint engraving at the edge, worn nearly smooth. TS2, Transfer Station 2. Her fingers traced the cold metal, her voice low and steady. For the ones they never wanted the world to find. Birds chirped overhead, but the woods felt hushed, as if holding their breath. Lana crossed over slippery rocks until she found them. 3 large, petrified trees clustered together on a ridge. She stood between them and looked down. The river split here, once flowing wide, but now diverted into 2 narrow forks, one veering off into stone. And there, just as drawn in the journal, a depression in the ground, almost circular, covered in moss and branches. They made me keep records. They thought I was obedient. But I wrote the truth too. In the margins. In code. Like we used to do in math class. Each was a map of survival, of resistance, of a child growing into a woman in the shadows, and of a system that was designed to erase every trace of what these children once were. But Kimmy hadn't forgotten. And neither had Nora, and Aaron too, despite everything had led them here. The last survivors. But were they the only ones? Kimmy reached out, hesitated, then placed the notebook on the bed between them. Lana took the journal carefully and opened to the first page. It looked like sermon notes, passages and reflections, scribbled verses, mantras of the cult. That night, Lana sat with the journal in her lap, flipping through the pages. The following morning, Aaron stood beside Lana at the ridge, staring down into the woods below. Aaron nodded. Lana looked at him. Then what? A hiding place. For what? Aaron turned to her, his voice low. For the ones they never wanted the world to know existed. Back at the hospital, Kimmy woke in the early light. The final tunnel wasn't marked on any map, but Kimmy's journal held the key. Lana followed the map at dawn. Lana cleared them gently. Beneath was a steel hatch, fused with age but still intact. With backup a few minutes behind her, Lana forced the hatch open. The air was still. What she found inside was not a prison, not exactly. It was a preservation. She entered a central room, larger, domed at the ceiling. Inside were typed lessons, handwritten notes, and margins filled with erratic scribbles. Words repeated over and over. Obedience is safety. Lana turned to her radio, requesting, "Search team, possible hidden chamber off main structure." They found room 6 behind a false wall, its door bricked over, sealed in concrete. Back at the hospital, Kimmy sat upright as Lana laid the photo from room 6 before her. Tears welled in her eyes. "That was her," she whispered. "Did she escape?" Lana asked. Kimmy shook her head. She wasn't trying to escape. She looked up, her gaze steady. But now, there was evidence that others had survived, if only for a while. The final journal entries, the mural, the tape, all of it pointed to one unthinkable truth. Some of the missing never died. Dozens of unnamed children relocated after the collapse of 2 unlicensed group homes in Northern California. All with scrubbed medical records and redacted intake forms. One entry stood out. A girl, age estimated between 13 and 15, brought in with no memory of her name. Placed in temporary care, described as emotionally disconnected but physically healthy. She refused to speak during her first year, her given name upon intake. Jane Doe, number 19. "Maya, do you know who Cassia is?" Slowly her eyes met Lana's. Maya's hands began to tremble. Lana waited. I used to dream about her," Maya said quietly. "I thought she was made up, a story I told myself. She would say things I didn't understand, about names, about tunnels, about forgetting." Her voice broke. "I thought it was trauma from someone else's life. I never believed it was mine." For a moment, just a flicker of recognition, then, no. Should I? Later renamed Maya Ellison, adopted in 1994 by a couple in Morning Lake, then she reached into her bag and pulled out a photo. One the investigators had recovered from room 6, but hadn't known how to identify. It showed a group of older children standing near the base of a tree. One boy in particular stood slightly apart from the rest, eyes down, shoulders stiff. She filed an official report titled, "The Morning Lake 15, a case reopened." The sun sparkled on the surface. Ducks passed silently across the water. A small wooden sign now stood at the edge of the dock. It read, "In memory of the missing. To those who waited in silence, your names are remembered." She knelt and placed a Polaroid beneath the sign. The one from the old mural, the girl running toward the light. She hosted free workshops for youth, quiet spaces for those who didn't have safe homes or even safe memories. Every Friday, she set out tea and read aloud from books the children chose. But sometimes at night, When the wind rustled the trees outside her window, she'd think of that name. This was a story of unimaginable loss, incredible resilience, and the relentless pursuit of a truth that refused to stay buried. The courage of Nora, Kimmy, Maya, and the silent strength of Cassia remind us that even in the deepest shadows, hope can flicker and memories can find their way home. Of the ones they had found, and the ones they hadn't, she'd look up at the stars over Morning Lake and wonder how many names had the world forgotten, and how many were still waiting for someone like Kimmy or Cassia or Lana to remember them. No one asked about her past, but sometimes during breaks, she'd trace the outline of a certain mural in the back room with her fingers, and then she stood. Because there were others out there. Maybe, just maybe, some of them were still waiting. Hit that bell icon to ensure you don't miss future stories that the world tried to bury. Your likes and comments fuel our mission to bring these hidden truths to light. Lana later found a note slipped beneath her office door. There's more out there. I've heard whispers, other towns, other kids. I wasn't brave enough then. Maybe I can be now. Taped to the letter was a photo of a bus. Old, rusted, but familiar. On the back, one word: Arcadia. It would take months, maybe years, for the full truth to come out. The missing children's case made national headlines, and behind all the noise, the town slowly began to breathe again. But for those who had lived it, the wounds hadn't fully healed. Not yet. The state would investigate what was missed. Families would come forward. Some might sue, some would mourn. But others, like Nora, Kimmy, and Maya, had a different goal. They wanted to start a foundation for lost children, for the unheard. For those who had their names taken, but found them again. Aaron stared. I thought they burned that, he whispered. They simply disappeared into a place the world was never meant to see. At least one of them, Cassia, had fought to be remembered. She was trying to leave a door open. She moved to Seattle, started taking classes, and began painting again. Something she hadn't done since she was a girl. The townspeople were kind. Some remembered her name from old prayer lists, some remembered her mother. She visited the lake every week and left a flower at the wooden sign. She never brought her journal, but she always brought her voice. Sometimes she just spoke aloud to the trees, saying names, real ones. Her first canvas was of the mural Cassia had painted in room 6. It's not just about surviving, she told Lana before leaving. It's about creating something no one can take away. That night, Lana stood at the edge of Morning Lake. The stars shimmered across the surface. 15 children were taken. 3 had returned. I was so afraid, she whispered. They told us if we left, no one would believe us, that the world didn't want us. Maya stood behind the counter, shelving a stack of secondhand paperbacks. Her hair pinned in a loose bun, glasses perched on her nose. When she looked up and saw Lana, she smiled politely. Sheriff. Mystery section's been busy this week. The 2 women stared at each other, one frozen in the past, the other having built a life outside of it. Kimmy nodded to him. You're the reason they weren't all forgotten, she said. You stayed. Then Kimmy whispered Cassia, and Maya whispered back, Kimmy. They embraced slowly at first, then fiercely. Tears fell, but no one said much. They didn't need to. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was proof they had endured. The mural haunted Lana. The face of the girl, Cassia, painted in swirls of blue and gold, arms outstretched as if trying to fly. She was older than the others in the photos, maybe 14, maybe 15. Her presence in the sealed room suggested something different about her. Cassia hadn't been a victim. She had been a witness. Maybe even a whistleblower, early 40s. Known for her soft voice and obsessive memory, able to recall customers' reading preferences from years prior, Lana had spoken to her dozens of times, borrowed books, asked about local history. Not once had she suspected a thing. Lana returned to the station and reopened a forgotten file. State Ward transfers, 1991 to 1993. Lana leaned back in her chair, her heart racing. Cassia didn't disappear. Cassia became Maya. Maya Ellison ran the bookstore in town. Quiet, kind. She drove straight to the shop. Lana stepped closer, her voice soft. The woman froze. Lana placed the photograph on the counter. The mural, the girl running. Lana laid her hand gently over Maya's. It was yours. You didn't just survive. You tried to leave a light on. Maya pressed her fingers to her lips, tears filling her eyes. They were wrong, Lana said. You were found. Later that night, Lana brought Maya to meet Kimmy. The moment the door opened, Kimmy stood upright. Aaron visited the next morning. He stood at the edge of the hospital room, unsure if he was welcome. I was too afraid to leave, he replied. Maya looked at him carefully. Maybe, but fear kept us alive. You remembered your name, Maya said. That's more than most. By the week's end, Lana gathered everything. The journals, the photos, the mural replica, the taped confessions, the recovered belongings. On a warm spring morning, Lana returned to the lake. 3 months later, the town of Morning Lake was quiet again. Tourists came and went. The school reopened. Nora was the first to leave. Kimmy chose to stay. She lived in a small cottage near the edge of the woods. Maya returned to her bookstore, but it wasn't just stories she shelved now. As for Aaron, he left Morning Lake quietly. No goodbye, no forwarding address. Lana kept the letter in her desk drawer. She didn't open a new case, not yet. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the silent pines and the echoes of Morning Lake. If this story moved you, if it made you believe that every forgotten name deserves to be remembered, then please consider subscribing to our channel right now. Join our community today and help us ensure no name ever truly stays forgotten.